welcome to Kindred Women. Amanda here, and I have Shelby White with me
Hello.
today. And we are just going to talk about anxiety. Sometimes, things come up in life where we just get a little bit
wound up.
Get
wound up. Absolutely.
Yeah. So why don't you talk about kind of where you feel like it kind of all started?
So for me, this started about 6 years ago now.
Okay.
It was something as simple as I started new birth control, and all of a sudden I was this anxious mess, I felt like.
Yeah.
And then I went to the doctor, and I'm like, hey, this is not right. So long story short, I got off of it. And then with that association, I was nervous to take medicine because I would, in my mind, I took something, it threw me off. So then I was like, okay, well, I don't want to take any medicine for this. So my dad, being a UPS driver, he delivered to this office that does neurofeedback.
Okay.
And he's like, Shelby, I have no idea what this is, but you might want to go take a look at it. So I was like, okay. So I scheduled an appointment, and long story short, they just hook you up to this machine. It's non-invasive at all, and it just gets your wavelengths going where, and your neurotransmitters balanced to where they should be.
Okay.
So with that, I had great success. And then I did that for about 5 or 6 months.
Okay.
And stopped for about 2 years. Everything was great. Early 2018, I was on a trip, and there was all these factors that were involved, but I had a really long panic attack that lasted probably like 7 hours. I mean, it just did not stop, no matter what I did. And that really shook me up because I'm like, why was this so bad? I normally can cope myself through it. And then that's when we kind of started trying to figure out, okay, is this just anxiety? Are there other factors? What's going on? And then about 6 months later, this was kind of still happening.
Okay.
And then that's when he started recommending medicine. And again, I was still very fearful of that because, again, I took something, that's why I'm like this, you know? So my uncle is actually a psychologist. So I was, talking to him throughout this whole thing, and he said, I think you should go see a holistic doctor just to see if there's something else going on and to get a second opinion. And I just want to mention there's nothing wrong with anxiety medicine at all. It's just something that I'm afraid of taking it. So I'm like, okay. And
I think that because everybody has different ways that they either deal with it or even just that anxiety presents itself.
Exactly.
And so just like what you're saying, if medicine was the trigger, then that would be something that you wouldn't really want to do.
Exactly. So I don't want anyone to take that it's bad, because I think that it's a great tool.
Yeah,
I just have not had a good experience with, not that medication in general, but just, in other ways. So anyway, so I go see this holistic doctor, and she's like, oh, your liver has not been processing your hormones correctly. And I was like, what? And she's like, this is more of a hormonal thing for you.
Okay.
And, so she's like, okay, we need to drastically change your diet. Like, you need to eliminate gluten and dairy and sugar and all of this. And that was overwhelming for me too, because growing up, I mean, I just ate whatever I wanted. And so now I'm like, what do you mean I can't have mac and cheese and ice cream and all of these things? And that kind of felt overwhelming too, because in the midst of feeling like, this is never going to end for me. Now on top of this, now I have to change everything that I know. And then I just had this feeling of, oh, now I can't eat anything, which was not true. But at first it feels like, oh my gosh, I have to take off all these things. And through that and through prayer and through, so many support systems, I mean, my friends, family, coworkers, and, therapy and everything, I finally have gotten to a place where, I still have days where it feels overwhelming, but it's like, okay, I'm going to use this as a way to help other people and, just make them realize, hey, like, you're not by yourself.
Absolutely.
Because when I listen to podcasts or things, and there are people that I look at on Instagram and I'm like, oh my gosh, they really have it figured out. And then they'll talk about anxiety or whatever it is. I'm like, okay, I am not the only one dealing with this, and so that does make it a little bit easier to navigate through. So,
that's good. And I think that, we like I said earlier, we all kind of go through this, and I think that's why it's just coming more a topic that people want to talk about, because it presents itself so differently for so many people. I think that it's one of those things that needs to be talked about, to say it's okay for you to be feeling this, but let's get to a place where you're not
exactly
anymore,
exactly
you know?
And even just to have, and this is something that I've struggled with, is what is normal anxiety. Like for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm having this thought, and I'll tell my friend, and she's like, oh yeah, girl, I have the same thought. Like that's not a big deal. That's a normal thought. But for me, it being something new, you know, I'm like, I associate it with, oh well, I never had this thought before, you know, that panic attack or whatever. And so I'm just starting to get used to the navigation of, yeah, this is normal. My body doesn't have to go into, oh my gosh, you know, this must be bad, or this isn't normal. But you know, going through even the changes of life of now, you know, we're thinking about kids, and we're, you know, think about things that, you know, adults think about, that I'm like, oh, I'm not 16 anymore. Like these thoughts are normal, and you know, bringing light to that, and making people feel like, okay, it's okay to feel overwhelmed some days. It's okay to feel like you don't want to do anything or whatever, and that doesn't mean that you have something wrong. You know, of course there is a limit to where we're like, okay, we need to intervene a little bit, but most of the time we're humans and we feel these things, and that's something that I've had to kind of start to get used to, is being like, oh, this is a normal emotion, you know?
And I think like there comes a point where you have a thought, and then you get to decide what you do with that thought. And so, of course, if you have trained your body and your mind, and your body now recognizes, if I have a thought like this, then I'm going to go this way. And you're going to have the panic attack, and you're going to feel stressed and overwhelmed. But if you can train yourself to stop that thinking and stop it immediately, then you'll go this way where you won't feel those things. And I think, you know, I've shared a couple of times, you know, when we've talked about anxiety, just how the main thing I feel like that I just keep going back to is taking those thoughts captive to the Lord Jesus Christ. And so what that looks like is, when you're driving down the road, or when you're in the shower, or, you know, you get a bad phone call, and you immediately go down that spiral thinking. Because that's what it is. You can
put yourself right in that position too. Like, I'll think, oh my gosh, I just took this. Like, if my husband doesn't answer the phone, I'm like, that's it. He was in a bad, like, and I'm like, okay, Shelby, you know, could that happen? Absolutely. We don't know what's going to happen. But is that why he's not calling you back? No. You know, and so really train, and I'm in, you know, the depths of that right now, is retraining my mind, because for the past, you know, year and a half, I've just been anxious all the time, and thinking, okay, this means I have anxiety, you know, this is anxiety, when really it's okay to have that thought, just cut it off. And, you know, one of the things that my, you know, holistic doctor told me was, don't lead everything with I think and I feel, because those need to stay in the back, and, you know, don't let them drive this train that you're on, you know, replace it with I know, I believe, I trust, and that goes, and it goes in with God, you know, like, being such a type A person, I'm so much of like, I have to be in control, I have to have a plan and everything, and it's like, God has a bigger plan for all of this, and that has been what has calmed me down a little bit, but at the same time, it's also hard to give up control in that sense.
Absolutely.
Because you're like, okay, like, I know you do, but can you like send me a text and like tell me that you do? Because it is hard to you know, really be in that mindset all the time, and I envy the people that are. Because I'm like, girl, man, I wish I could just be like, well, you know, wherever the Lord takes me today, because I'm just not like that.
It's definitely been a journey with me in the control too. So, you know, you've talked about the holistic, you know, medicine and things like that. What are some of the other kind of resources that you feel like you have, that have kind of helped you along the way?
I would say really just having the support of like friends and family, and a good therapist, and really looking to God, you know, like, and I've always had a relationship with God, but not until this has happened have I been as close to him as I ever, you know, and I haven't really lately found a church home or anything like that, when before I was going to church every Sunday, and I still kind of felt like I wasn't as close with him, and now it's like he took me through the trenches to become closer with him, you know, and now it's like starting to see that, and again, not every day do I remember that, so I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, that gets me through every day, because sometimes it doesn't, but you know, really just remembering, okay, and taking a step back and being like, I've impacted people and helped people, and grown in myself and grown closer to God, and I really have conversations with him now.
Yeah.
When before I would be like, pray just, you know, the textbook type, like,
Yes.
oh, you know,
Yeah.
I have to pray this way, and that's just not how it is.
Right. Yeah.
And he just wants us to have a conversation with him,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where I've gotten.
That's
And,
great.
you know, so maybe this whole time I've been like, why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
Why has this been so bad? Why have I not been able to get a grip on it? And, you know, the reason why is just because God wanted me to be closer
Yeah.
with him and
That's
impact
great.
other people, and, you know, that's
Yeah.
just how it
And
is.
and sharing, and that's the thing that I just love about sharing your story, and that's, you know, why we've started doing this,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
people need to have hope. You know, I mean, I want anybody to be able to look at this, any interview, and know that there is hope with whatever they're going through.
Yeah.
That God is going to bring them to the other side, and that's what's happening. You know, and you're able to say that even though I do deal with stuff still, it's not to where it was, because I know I have a foundation. And that's what I think is so important is, you know, we think of like the song about, you know, building your house on sand and how it's going to fall down when the waves come. But if you build your house on the rock, which is God, then your foundation is going to be strong. And so you start at the top with God being at the top, and then you go down and you build that support system. You talk about it to your family, you talk about it to your friends.
Yeah.
And of course it doesn't have to be all the time. I mean, you're not like a walking I'm billboard about anxiety.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
it's just you want people to know that I'm an open book. I want people to know that this is what's happened, but this is where I am now.
Yeah. And that's how I feel. I mean, I'm very vocal about how I feel. Almost sometimes to people, I'm like, sorry, I'm talking about this again, but I just gotta get, you know, I have to process this out loud.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of that is me just being able to help other people. Like you know, I'm such a people person. You know, I've always worked with people. I love people, and it's just I want them to know, hey. You know, my life might look perfect on social media or look, you know, a certain way, but there's still things that I deal with just like everybody else. And, you know, and this is how I got through it, and just showing people there's alternatives, because a lot of, you know, holistic care and alternative medicine is not very popular. It's starting to become popular, but just as far as like healing things with food, I mean, I was one of that person that was like, wait, food has healing value. Like I know that sounds so naive, but I just didn't think of it like that. And now just being like, okay, you know, I'm gonna take care of my body, because you have to really, it's more going in depth of, I need to take care of myself physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, I mean, in a whole way, instead of just, okay, I need to like push this down and ignore it. And I think it takes a lot to just face it head on. And that's what I'm here to help people do, and show them, hey, you can do it.
That's
you know,
great.
So
did you say that you do go to therapy now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was actually seeing this, and this is how God works too, is Cynthia, which is the neurofeedback specialist that I was seeing. She was a resident at the time.
Okay.
And I just started seeing her. We clicked. And then I stopped neurofeedback because I felt great. And she had actually moved to Washington State. And then, you know, about 2 years passed, and then I had that really bad panic attack. So I'm like, okay, I know I need to start back up into this again. And I called that office and I said, I know Cynthia's not here, but I'll go to anybody else. And they're like, actually, Cynthia moved back.
Oh, wow.
So you can see her. And I was like,
that's awesome.
God is so good. You know, I was like, because she knew all of the history. And not that you can't start over, but I just felt like, okay, she's really going to know me, and she can reassure me, Shelby, you're not going crazy.
Right.
You're okay, you know. And so we started, you know, doing that again. And now we started focusing on talk therapy to kind of work through retraining the brain, and you know, in conjunction with neurofeedback and other things that I'm doing. But
okay, that's good.
Yeah, so I think that that's really important, because if you don't have a friend or a family member or coworker or whoever to talk to, these people are, you know, therapists are always going to have your back. They are always going to have your best interest. And I think that this, the stigma around it has been like, oh, you know, you go to therapy. But I'm like, you're dang right. You know what I mean? Like, it makes me feel good. And then sometimes when I say things out loud, I'm like, oh, okay.
And sometimes when you say things out loud, you hear how ridiculous it is.
Yes.
You know,
I freaked out about that, or whatever it is, and also to have somebody there to give you tools and advice and really kind of be that reassurance, because when we get in our head so much, we can take it to the extreme. And there's been times I've taken it to the extreme, like, I'm never going to get better. And she kind of looks at me and is like, Shelby, it's not as bad as what is in your mind. Not discounting anything, but just being realistic and being like, Shelby, when I look at you, I don't see this manic person, and that really kind of brings me back down to, okay, I feel better now, so that's been helpful too.
That's good. So what does kind of your day-to-day life look like now, since, you've started all the therapy and all of that stuff?
So day to day, it really just ranges. But as far as really just being able to stay positive, I mean, there are definitely days where, like yesterday was one of those days where I was like, man, this is not a good day, But being more at peace with, okay, this is not a good day, but tomorrow's a new day.
So you're married. So how can a spouse help in helping you?
Helping me.
So like how, I mean, I think of just, like day-to-day stuff. I know my husband helps me in certain things. So what types of things could you tell other people, that you would want? Like, what kind of help would you want from other people?
Mainly just listening. And I'm such a person that I love words of affirmation. And so a lot of times just kind of tell me, you're okay, you're fine. And sometimes that's all it takes, and really just to feel like I'm heard, and just to be there for me, and not treat it as if, anytime I say something that I'm like, oh, like, I had this thought, I thought something, and he just kind of giggles and is like, it's okay, and not that he blows it off, but he doesn't entertain it enough to where it makes me feel like it's a thing, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
He's very, because he'll say, oh, I wish I had, an answer for you. I wish I could fix this. And I'm like, you are doing just what I need you to do, really. It's just listen and I don't feel from him that it's annoying or that, negative things. I don't really get from that way. But the biggest advice I would say is just listen to that person. Listening ear, and really just to be there for them and show them like, hey, you're not defined by this,
Yeah, that's good. Can you say now that you feel like you've pretty much overcome this?
I would say yes. The anxious side of my brain is like, well, you could still, but when I really look at the whole thing, yes. It is still a work in progress. Naturally, I'm kind of just a high-strung person, so I don't think there's going to be a day where I'm just total, like, type B, zenned out. But I think just finding the tools really has been the biggest thing for me. And finding a support system, because, when I had to drastically change my eating, I mean, that impacts not everyone around me, but kind of everyone around me. And they've all been very supportive. It hasn't been like, oh, of course it's kind of a joke of like, oh, Shelby's just going to eat organic, but that's kind of just all in fun and games, but they truly are supportive, and they, I don't feel like my new lifestyle of things is like a burden to anyone, it's kind of just like, this is a decision I'm making for myself. That doesn't mean that everyone has to eat like me or everyone has to do this and that. Some days I might want a cupcake and I would eat one, but for the majority of times I've seen such a difference that when I eat these things, I can tell, okay, I'm more wound up than normal. It just, it affects my thyroid, it affects, whatever. So really just having the support system that's kind of like, okay, and now I'm in the groove of it. Like now eating just is not as, oh my gosh, I can't have this, I can't have that. I mean, around the holidays it's harder because in the store I'm like, oh, I really want that pie or whatever. But really just kind of being confident and okay, this is just how I'm going to live my life now, and that's just what it is. So
it's good. And even sometimes I feel like one of the things that I have learned just with the busyness and I feel like busyness is where the anxiety comes.
Yes.
I don't know if you can say that, but so
I agree.
This is something that I've learned. I'm also type A, so I like for everything to be aligned and to be perfect. And I really feel like I have gotten control over a lot of that within the last probably 3 years, probably since I had my son. And one of the things that I really try to do, and I just encourage you to change your mindset and to change the actual words that are coming from your mouth. This one thing. Instead of saying that you're busy, when you say I'm busy, how does that make you feel? Typically for me, I feel anxious.
Yes.
I feel like overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I feel like everything is going to go out of control at some moment.
Yeah.
So what I say now is I say, I've got a full schedule.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the anxious feelings and those overwhelming feelings, they're with good things too. It's not just
bad.
Yeah. And so I would encourage you, and even you, that if you look at your week and every day you've got something going on.
Yeah.
Treat it as like, I've got a full day, but it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And even just trying to go out the door in a way where you're not yelling or running out in frustration and manic and panic mode, because just those little things truly have helped me feel like everything's gonna be
fine. Yeah. And a lot of that, I started reading, Emily Lay's books, which I'm like,
we both love
anything
Emily
that she
Lay.
says, I'm like, right, this is like my second Bible.
Yeah.
Is really just kind of learning what you're allowed to say no. And that's something that I was
that's good.
What? I can't say no to people. Like I have to say yes to everyone. Right. And that's not how it is, you know, and once you say yes to everything, you're saying no to important things. And even you can tell people, no, I have a full day today, and that could mean that you're doing nothing all day.
Right. Yeah.
But that is my plan for the day, is
good.
I'm just gonna take the day and just do nothing, or clean the house or whatever it is. It doesn't mean that you have to run around.
Right.
And I think a lot of people too, it's like, if I'm busy, that means I'm successful. And that's not always the case. And, I started my business, I'm a wedding planner, and I started my business 3 years ago. And I also work full time. So I had to find a balance between, okay, I work, full time and I'm doing this. And, both of them are in their own separate ways demanding. On top of, having a social life and,
being
the
married,
list goes on, and being married. And I don't even have kids yet. So moms out there probably like, okay, girlfriend, let's nothing. But it's just, I knew, I was going to have to balance this, way out somehow. And when I kind of made the decision of this past year, I've already got some weddings booked in 2020, but after that, I'm not taking anything anymore. And that was hard for me to do, because it's like, I've built this successful business. Am I making a mistake? Should I not, stop because it's going well? And, because God put it on my heart, we're ready for a family, but just realizing, okay, I have to, close this chapter for now. I can reopen it later.
Exactly.
Just because I'm not going to take any weddings now does not mean that I'm like done for the rest of forever. And that could be relatable to anybody. Whether you are a mom already and you want to take a break from being room mom, you're allowed to do that, and then you can restart it at any time. It's not just I'm closing this chapter forever. And I like what Emily Lay kind of stands for, is just taking, when less becomes more, her new book. I'm like starting to read that and I love it. But it's all just about, okay, we have control over our lives to in that extent, in our schedules, and we don't have to just fill, because then we can't help other people and our kids.
And sometimes I think one of the hardest parts is it's stuff that you want to do, just like what you're talking about with the wedding planning. Like, it's something that you want to do, but do I need to be doing it? And is my life going to feel overwhelmed and then go down that spiral? So we have to take our life back, so to speak, and decide that less sometimes can be more, and it's okay to say no to your friends, even or to family, where you're setting those boundaries and things. And I think that this kind of leads right into just talking about where it can make everything look like everything is perfect. And because you're doing all of these things and having all of these things. So why don't you talk a little bit about social media and just kind of how that has played a little bit of a role with anxiety, and then we're going to wrap up, and this is actually our last interview for 2019,
yay.
So I'm super excited about that.
Thank you.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So social media to me is a blessing, and it can sometimes be, I don't want to say a curse, but it cannot be good at times. We get wrapped in the spiral of comparison. I know I do. I mean, I think that I'm not, but then I'll look around my house and I'm like, oh, I could change this. I could change it. I need this new outfit. And really, you know, I've got a closet full of things that I don't even wear now, you know.
And Emily Lay is in our ear saying, less is more.
Less is more. But meanwhile, I'm on Instagram like, oh, well, you know, they have it figured out. There's no way that this person's anxious or whatever it is. And a lot of people even tell me, oh my gosh, like your house is perfect. Your weddings are perfect. Your clothes are perfect. What, you know, your life is perfect. And while that is such a big compliment to me and I hold, you know, great pride in that, my life is not perfect.
Right.
You know, I mean, my life is my version of perfect, as in, you know, I'm blessed, I have a house, you know, whatever. But at the same time, it just really goes to show that it's like, that's why I want to talk about anxiety and I want to talk about things that are not so glamorous because all of us deal with it.
Yeah, we do.
And it's just one of those things that it's like, just because, you know, I like aesthetically pleasing photos, you know, whether on my story, because I am that person that like puts a filter over my story and I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, but it's just, I like pretty pictures.
Well, and I think, we talked about this a little bit ago, that, you know, there's a creative mind and that's kind of where we sit, where it's like creatively, we have that eye to where we know just how something might look and we can envision it and then it happens and then it does happen to look good, but and so I can attest to that. Like, I don't want people to compare me even, you know, because we talked about like we compare sometimes to people's Instagrams or life just in general, whatever, but I have a hard time sometimes thinking, I don't want people to think that I
have it all figured out. Yeah, and I agree too. And I was listening to a podcast the other day where it was two podcast hosts and they both were comparing themselves to each other.
Okay.
They were like, oh, you know, so-and-so, like, she has it all figured out. Meanwhile, the other one, like, you and I, like, say we both had, you know, a YouTube channel or whatever. I would be like, oh my gosh, Amanda has it all figured out. I have no idea what I'm doing. And then you're over here like, Shelby has it all figured out. I have no idea what I'm doing. So they're interviewing, you know, they're talking to each other and they talk about that and they're like, wow.
That's good,
And I think that happens every day. You know, I think that it's like, I could look at your Instagram and be like, there's no way she's anxious. There's no way, you know, she's got her life all figured out. And meanwhile, someone's looking at mine thinking she's got her life figured out. And so when we all just come together and we are vulnerable and talk about things, it doesn't mean we have to talk about it every single day.
Right, exactly.
Because I definitely don't want to do that either. But that's when we start to realize we can be a good community for each other. And then that's when the comparison kind of goes away because everyone is in a different stage of life. So whether you're dealing with something, you know, being single or married or whatever it is, there's something that someone's looking at being like, oh, I have to keep up with so-and-so. You know? So if we can just kind of eliminate that, I think that would help a lot.
I do too. You know, kind of to close a little bit, you know, we've talked about the Bible verse on taking our thoughts captive. So I do want to read that. And it says, it's 2 Corinthians 10:5, and it says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And, you know, what that means is we can take that thought captive. Captive means to hold it against its will. You know, the enemy, we have an enemy who is real, who wants us to go down that spiral, to have the anxious thoughts. And so we have to take those thoughts captive. You know, sometimes this is a daily thing. I mean, like what Shelby is saying, that it's not something that, yes, she has overcome it, but does she still deal with it sometimes?
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's even the same with me with fear. And we're going to talk about that in a second, just real quick, where, you know, I have overcome that, but there are still moments where the enemy tries to sneak in because that's what he knows. He doesn't pick things that we're not going to be bothered by. He picks the same things. If you look back at your life, the enemy chooses not one thing, but he knows where you go.
He knows where your weak spots are. And a lot of it too, you know, Julie, which is the naturopath that I see, she's like, Shelby, the enemy is trying so hard to get into your life because your plan, like the plan that God has for you and the purpose that God has for you is so big that he's not leaving you alone. And that has also kind of, you know, helped me too. And not kind of, it really has helped me a lot because, you know, then when these thoughts do come in, it's like, okay, Satan, go back to the depths where you came from, because this is not, this is not coming from God. Right, this is not coming from me. This is coming from you. And once you kind of call him out on it, and you're like, no, you're not going to be in here today, and then just remembering, okay, God's going to use, and I always pray this every day. I'm like, God, use this for good. Place people in my life, which is funny how we ended up here, because, I'm like, put people in the path of my life that need to hear of this story, that I'm going to, that I can help them or impact them, whether it was you or your audience or whoever it is, use it for good. Absolutely. And I think that's really
and we talked a little bit about fear, where fear, that is in sometimes where the anxious thoughts come from too. And so we know that the spirit of fear is not from God. So you kind of shared with me that you had your Bible study this morning. So why don't you talk about that?
So I use the Jesus Calling devotional, because I like that it's short and sweet and simple, and that it really resonates with me. And it was just basically talking about, do not be afraid. Being afraid is not, coming from me. I don't remember the words exactly, but basically just, go on this adventure with me and go, on this plan, that I have for you and everything, and just give everything to him.
That's good.
And I pray that prayer frequently too, is just, okay, God, you've got a bigger plan for me. And really just show me the signs. I mean, give me a billboard sign, because sometimes it's hard to distinguish what's God, what's me, what's, whatever. And on the way here, I actually was behind a car and the license plate said, "Stay calm."
Oh, yes.
And I was like, wow. I mean, if you look around, and that's one thing about, putting our phones down too, because being on my phone all the time, I'm so guilty of it. Next thing you know, it's like 3 hours later, and I'm like, okay, I need to get
What
off.
have I been doing?
Exactly. But really looking for those signs, and asking him, just asking him, hey, can you take this off of me today, because I cannot take anymore. I'm gonna give this to you. And sometimes it's easier said than done, but if we really just remember, he has our best interest. He is not putting us on this earth to be miserable or live in anxiety or anything like that. And that's another thing that Julie has told me too, is just, you were not put here to be this anxious ball of, nerves, and, really finding a way to help people. And, kind of, if you just take that and be like, instead of looking at it as a negative, turn around and be like, okay, I'm going to use this for good today.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. That kind of thing. Yeah,
this has been so good. I'm so glad that.
Thank you for having me.
And the cool thing is, this was the first time we've actually met.
Yes.
So, I feel really like we connected.
I was going to say,
well.
I feel like I've known you this whole time.
I know.
Yes.
So I'm so glad that you came on, and thank you guys for watching.
Yeah.
And like I said,
so much.
This is the last interview of 2019. So 2020 is coming, and we are ready for it.
Yes, absolutely. So, I'm excited. Well, thank you guys so much for listening.
And have a good day.
Yes. Bye.